frank discussion on life, the law, and liberty. Sponsored by the LaHood Norton Law Group. And now, your objection sustained. Your hosts, Karen Klaus and former Bexar County District Attorney, Nico LaHood.
Thank you so much for listening to Sidebar. Yes, the former Bexar County DA, Nico LaHood, trial lawyer, managing partner of LaHood Norton Law Group. Wait a second, he's not here.
Oh.
Is he going to be late?
He's going to be here soon.
Okay. And George Araujo, scholar, former chemist, and pharmaceutical researcher and director. Thank you so much for being here, George, so I won't be all by myself.
It's a sincere pleasure. It's good to be back.
Yes. And so the question I have for you is, does Kamala Harris now have street cred now that she's actually visited the border?
Oh, what a difference she made this week, huh?
Yes. And she also had her first solo interview with, who was it? MSNBC. And another one. But I still am a little bit confused because I don't know her policies. Is this a theme for all of her appearances?
It is, and she seems to be pretty proud of it. Yeah, the less she says, the better, it seems. Yeah, she's managed to pull, I think, an impressive trick I actually didn't think she'd be able to do. She's managing to run as a challenger. But not to herself.
Explain that. No. Explain that. Explain that. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's she, with the obvious help of the media, is running a campaign that pretends delusionally that she hasn't been the vice president of the United States for the last 3.5 to 4 years, and that Joe Biden hasn't been the president. I mean, she is part of the Biden-Harris administration, of course, but they're positioning her as a new way forward, and some of that I saw some of that delusion crack significantly this past Wednesday because while she's pitching that at the interview that you're talking about, with MSNBC's Stephanie Ruhle, while she's doing that, Biden's on The View. On The View.
Not talking very well about her. To me, it didn't seem.
Kind of throwing her under the bus.
Yeah.
In the sense that you can see there's an edge that he's trying to act like this was all part of the plan for him to step down. And he tried to pitch it in the sense that, it's just that we've done so well. It's just time. I've done everything that I really needed to do, and it's just time to sort of pass the baton. But while he's talking, you got to remember that on the eve of him stepping down, he said that
he wasn't stepping down.
He wasn't stepping down.
And that was going to be the way it was going to be. And then suddenly you just didn't see him for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it seems schizophrenic to me as our venerable former DA joins us. It seemed schizophrenic to me on Wednesday, while Biden's saying what he's saying on The View, that, he thought everything had gone well, really. I mean, he had done such a phenomenal job, and so there's really nothing else for him to do. And that to the extent that he needed to do anything, that Kamala is more than capable of doing that. He has delegated everything to her from domestic to economic policy. She's totally able.
She's been the one in charge. Didn't it sound like that?
He has delegated everything from domestic to economic policy to her. And the number one issue, of course, on voters' minds is the economy, for good reason. So he's saying this on The View. In the meantime, she's, on the interview with Stephanie Ruhle, and then later at the Economic Club of Pittsburgh, basically saying that she's a new way forward, trying to put as much daylight as possible between her and the administration that she's part of. She's basically trying to run as a challenger, Nico. How does that work exactly?
But don't you
it's
think
worked rather well so far.
Right, I was going to say that because a lot of people, I know this sounds ridiculous, but a lot of people may not even know who she is because she's been so gone the entire time she's been the vice president. People are wondering, where has she been? What is she doing? She got appointed to be the border czar, but she's not been to the border. What is she doing? So all of a sudden, it's almost as if she is a new person.
And so isn't this the open question? Which version of Kamala Harris are voters going to go with? The version that outright rejected her during the 2019-2020 primaries. Is that the version of voters? Because they don't like her. She doesn't have anything of substance to say. She had that issue then, and they categorically rejected her campaign, less than 1% of the vote. There's that. And then there's the media spin. Then there's this media creation that Kamala Harris truly is this sort of new way forward. She is a new generation. She has a whole new generation of policies, from the economy to the border. We have yet to know what they are. And so which is it? Is it the version where they've actually weighed in based on her campaign in 2019 and 2020? Or are they going to vote on this media creation? That's the question right now. And I think this week told us a lot, at least if you're to believe the polling, of where voters are landing. And people are getting less. And I know we said this same thing last weekend. It was a suspicion that voters were starting to really sort of call bull on this. And you're starting to see Trump establish a more convincing lead. But that's the question, Nico. That's the open question. Which version of Kamala Harris shall we believe?
Well, there isn't a version of Kamala Harris. The version that they're portraying is I'm not Trump. That's it. That's literally what the interviewer, if you're talking about Stephanie Rule, I guess, however you pronounce her name. I mean, she auditioned for the interview on Bill Maher the week before.
She did.
Where she defended her not doing interviews, like, well, this is going to be a safe one. And so, and to her credit, if you watched it, and I didn't watch all of it, but I watched enough, she asked some good questions, but she just didn't ask any good follow-up. Because we talked about a few weeks ago that many times the real gem of the interview is in the follow-up.
That's right.
The
That's
first
right.
question poses and sees where you're at. It happens in trial techniques as well. You have this initial question, and then you see where that witness is going to take you or take themselves, and then you dig in because you know where you want to go with your point you're trying to make to a jury. And there was just no follow-up. I mean, it was just the same talking points. You could see she's going through the index cards in her head.
Memorized, exactly. The memorized lines.
Somebody else did this. I don't know. I mean, how many times did she say aspirations and dreams and ambitions and hardworking and work ethic and opportunity and economy and ability to achieve dreams and afford? I mean, all these different descriptions. It's like, okay, when are you going to get to the point? And she didn't delve in. And I believe that even Stephanie had to kind of protect her own integrity and journalistic integrity and criticized her after for not answering any questions. But then the question I would have asked, well, then what about you not asking and pressing in? Isn't that your job? You want to crap on her for not giving good answers. I mean, detailed answers, whether you think they're good or not, is irrelevant. Detailed answers, but where are your detailed questions?
She couldn't even ask a follow-up question about her working at McDonald's.
Nothing.
When she asked that question and Kamala Harris said, yes, I did work at McDonald's, I would be like, well, which one?
She did.
And when?
This interview was basically a pushback. It's like all the interviews appear to be, and I really want to be objective about this. I'm not trying to be a side. I want to be objective when I'm analyzing this. This appears to be she's not doing any interview. See, she's doing interviews. She's doing something. She's out there. She's talking. But what are you saying? And you're being very selective. I mean, to Trump's point, whether you like him or not, I mean, to Trump's credit, he's going, whoever will accept him. I mean, he's going to podcasts, he's doing town halls, he's doing press conferences, and whether you like his answers or not, and I've been very critical of his answers for sure at different times, rightfully so, but he's out there putting himself in the heat of the battle. I mean, in the lion's den, so to speak, taking questions. And I think people are starting to see that because you're seeing polls. I think George was mentioning that. And by the way, I was late because it's my daughter's 16th birthday today. So we did we woke her up and we did all that stuff. And I look around and I was like, oh crap, it's 5 minutes.
Time to work.
So thankfully I don't live 10 hours away like George, so I can just jump on the highway. But so that was that. So happy birthday, Angel, even though she's not listening. But so this is what we're seeing. I don't even know what point I was trying to make. But the bottom line is this. No. This was a pushback, I think, to her saying I'm not doing any interviews, but she's not putting herself in a position to answer to the American people. And I think the point I was trying to make is that the polls are starting to reflect that.
Yeah, but I think I was listening very carefully to what you said, and I think you said exactly what I said very differently, which is not unusual. That's fine. But you said basically that Stephanie Rules was on Bill Maher, and she was there with Brett Stevens, another left-wing journalist, right? And they both asked her that. They both said, look, we think this isn't good. She hasn't answered any questions. Brett Stevens actually said, I don't know who she is.
Yeah.
And Stephanie Rule looked at him and said, so what? Yeah. Basically. She said, okay, Brett, so you don't know who she is. Let's say she answers a question. Okay? And she answers it in a way you don't like. Are you going to vote for Trump? And he said, well, I already said I'm not going to vote for Trump. That's not the point. We don't know anything about her. And I don't know if he was really allowed to finish his thought. But I think where Brett Stevens should have gone is, I'm not indicative of the people that are on the fence. I'm already in the Harris camp. That's what he should have said. It's this cocoon view of reality where everybody thinks like us. That's your criticism.
I think it's more hubris and arrogant and cocoon as well, because it's not about you two idiots. I mean, I'm sorry, there's no other way to say it. Talk about the arrogance. It's about them. It's about the undecided. It's about the American people. When you're a journalist, your journalistic duty is not to yourself. It's to your audience. I mean, that's just that plain and simple. As a public servant, if someone's serving the community in a public way, locally or nationally, it shouldn't be about them. And we're going to talk about Eric Adams here this morning as well. But it shouldn't be about them. It's about the people that hired you to serve them. And so this is the mindset of journalism today. Well, what is going to change the opinion? This is what I think. Well, then go write an opinion piece somewhere. You're not a journalist.
Right.
You know, you're an opinion advisor or whatever, opinion writer. But so this is where they're going. So that's I saw the clip of that. Yeah. And I thought it was very arrogant for her to respond to him that way. And he wasn't ready to banter back and forth. She obviously had some good little one-liners. Tell me when you go to Utopia or whatever her statement was. Right. That's Nirvana. Not the point. Nirvana. Thank you. That's not the point.
It isn't the point. And Scott Jennings on CNN, because I thought that he was very, very helpful this week, and he pointed out these issues, this idea that the voters, the notion that voters don't care. All they care is that she's not Trump. And no, we're way, way, way past that. Karen, I know you wanted to pivot. I'll let you pivot.
Well, I do. I want to say that, yes, we are talking about other topics like Eric Adams. We're also talking about the New York Times and how they believe that, our Constitution is dangerous to America, and other topics. But I also want to say that Carlos, who is on Facebook Live right now, says, I'm starting to think Kamala is even dumber than the people voting for her. We have got to continue the conversation. Get on one of the platforms and join us live there as well as on air. We'll be right back. Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, you can also join us online on one of the social media platforms. Like I was just looking at Facebook Live, and there's
Twitter,
also X. And
if you're like, man, I just listened to the radio station. I didn't know, guys, you were on social media. Well, go to sidebartv.com, sidebartv.com, and you'll find us on the different platforms. And listen there and share it, like it, heart it up, and share it. And thank you for everybody, because we posted the promo yesterday morning, and until today, I saw a lot of people sharing the promo as well as sharing the stream today. So thank you very much.
Hey, George, one thing that you mentioned on the last break is that you are starting to see Trump pull away from Kamala Harris in the polls. And I asked you during the break, what polls are you looking at? Because I just saw one this morning that said that Harris and Trump are neck and neck in Michigan and Wisconsin. And I was like, well, I mean, that's...
Right, and what does that tell you? What do you know about Michigan and Wisconsin? They're hotbeds of conservative thought. No, of course not. I mean, Trump should be nowhere near Harris in Michigan, Wisconsin.
That is definitely something to think about.
Yeah, and she has every reason to be worried because of that. Trump, Nico, traditionally does terrible in the national polls. I mean, he's just not been great.
Yeah, a lot of people ask questions about that, George. Can you explain that? How can someone do terrible on national polls but then be leading in local data?
Right. So the national polls are looking at the popular sentiment. And we don't obviously put presidents in the White House because of national sentiment. We put them in the White House based on the Electoral College. And that's where state issues, state concerns matter. Because at the end of the day, it's the number of delegates that get attributed electorally to the president that wins the day. And so state polling tends to kind of drill down to the particulars, to the things that will really motivate people to go to the ballot box. And a national is just, it really is just sort of on aggregate. It's an aggregate sentiment. It doesn't really drill down to where people are at the state level. And of course, it only matters at the state level. But even at the national level, and there's two things that I'm focusing on right now. There's a Gallup poll that came out, and it is the best poll that Trump has ever had. And it said on virtually all of the issues, I think there were 10 major issues, the Republicans are ahead, decisively ahead on 9 out of 10 issues. That's all Republicans. And that the political environment looks very, very good for Trump as he continues to distance himself numerically. Harris is nowhere near on the issues that matter to people, and that's the issues of the economy and on immigration. Back to this national deal, this national poll. Why is Trump neck and neck with her? That shouldn't be the case. If you look at 2016, you look at 2020, he wasn't even in the same planet on the national vote. And Scott Jennings pointed this out this past week on CNN. I think he's sort of a rare voice of reason on that network. But he brought that up, and he said that, look, 51% of people thought that, remember Trump's presidency as a very good presidency. And it's about 37% who think the same of Biden-Harris. And it's just not even close, he made the point. A 14% lead? Are you kidding me? So this is a CNN poll. CNN says that he is tied with registered voters along with Harris, and that he's 1 point behind with likely voters, and that he's 11 points ahead on the issue of the economy. This is CNN. We have not seen comparably favorable assessments from these types of polls ever. And so they have good cause to be concerned.
Someone was criticizing on that. Are you talking about in Arizona or nationally?
I was talking nationally. I was talking about the national vote.
I heard criticism where he was ahead in Arizona.
Yeah, let's talk about Arizona. If you
so he's up. They have 11 and 8 points respectively, or whatever it is. But the problem is that he was up more. So you're up by 11, but you were up by whatever it was. I think it was 5 and 7 points respectively on those two topics.
Yeah,
the border.
I got to be honest with you. I think you brought that up on our radio when we were chatting. That's the one you were talking about, the 11 points. And I expressed skepticism of those numbers. I don't think that is the case, at least not polling wise. The polls that I've seen on Arizona have him ahead, but it's a hair.
But who's answering these polls? I mean, have you thought about that? I mean, when I do this political call, I don't even answer it. And if they get one by me because it's a scam, and it's some dude asking me a question, I just hang up on them. I don't even answer. I don't answer texts.
Me too.
I don't answer any of that crap.
Who the hell are these people? So, but that raises an important question, that there are a number of people. There's about 1 to 2% of people that come up that are they just don't want to talk. They're showing up as people who refuse to answer questions. They just don't want to talk to the pollster. So it raises some interesting questions of whether there's untapped favorability or preference for Trump. This is what we believe happened in 2016. But let me get back to Arizona, because you're raising a very important question. I don't want to lose sight of it. The polls that I've seen have Trump ahead in Arizona by a couple of percentage points. It is not something that is outside of the average margin of error. Nevertheless, he's ahead. This is really significant, because if you remember in Arizona, you remember what happened in Arizona in 2020. This was a big problem. And this is why our conversation last week about what the Arizona Supreme Court decided, which is a tragedy, that 98,000 persons who were found as a result of a database mining exercise to not have any citizenship, legitimate citizenship status, are to remain on, to remain with access to the ballot. In other words, they are able to vote in state elections, and they've always been able to vote in federal elections. And so this is concerning 98,000 people for whom citizenship status we are unable to determine. And the heritage.org, please go to heritage.org for any meaningful, reliable election integrity analysis. They have something called the Oversight Project, and it really is very detailed. It's well researched, and they followed up on this issue of the 98,000 persons. Why does that matter? Trump lost reputedly in Arizona in 2020 by how much?
98,000.
He lost by 11,000, Karen. So if we've got 100,000 persons that are out there, they're allowed to vote, you can understand why people will be skeptical and concerned. So I'm very concerned about Arizona. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm worried about it, because it seems like here we go again. it seems like we see this. We see the precipice
but that
coming.
affects everything.
Yeah.
Senate races,
Yeah.
everything. All
Yeah.
down ballot races. It's a big deal. I mean,
Well-
it's not just about the presidential race.
On a note of good news on that, I have seen, and we've talked about here in Texas, of course, 1.1 million people that shouldn't have been on the voter roster have been purged from the voter rolls.
In North Carolina too, right?
In North Carolina as well. This is a big deal. We're starting to see this more and more in various states, and that matters. Arizona, not so much.
Didn't Texas do it too?
1.1 million.
Yeah.
I hope that continues. The Republican National Committee is being much more disciplined. You've seen a lot more lawsuits on this successfully. This needs to happen. Election integrity truly matters. If people are going to vote,
for everybody.
they should.
For
Exactly.
Democrats,
They should be
Republicans,
voting
Independents,
legitimately.
everybody,
They
yeah.
should be real people with real addresses. They should be citizens. They must be citizens. It is illegal to vote.
But that's not crazy. This is not some
you're not a
crazy
citizen.
idea. You can't, like I said, I've said on the show many times before, you can't even own property in Mexico without being a citizen in
You
Mexico.
can't serve on a jury
Nothing,
without
which you
being a
shouldn't be. I
citizen.
mean, this is insane, the idea that you want non-citizens to decide our leaders. I mean, this is not, and everybody on both quote-unquote sides, on all sides, whatever sides there are out there, should agree. If you're an American citizen, you should want Americans voting. Period. End of story. This is absolutely insane. In Mexico, my father-in-law was telling me a while back when he was in town that they vote on a Sunday. It's one day because nobody works on a Sunday.
Yeah.
It's one day, and you go vote in person, and they count it. They knew by that evening who the new president was. End of story. I mean, so all these other countries can do it. Argentina, there, everywhere else. But the United States, a superpower, can't get their crap together.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is. And so I think there's every reason to be optimistic, but let's not sit on our ass here. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think you're asking a legitimate question almost weekend. Why? What's with the neck and neck stuff? This has been an abysmal, and voters say so. This has been an abysmal presidency on the issues that people care about. Why do we see Trump and Harris neck and neck like they are? And to the extent Trump's ahead, he has not been ahead beyond the margin of error. This is a concern, and so there aren't really great answers to those questions.
You can ponder. I mean, it's either Trump's personality or the culture of this country is changing, and then we're in real trouble moving down the road. I mean,
Either
it's-
or Vinny online says it's fake polls that the Democratic Party and the press continue to stage.
maybe. I mean,
Yeah,
look,
and I'm talking about if you go to the Real Clear Politics polling average, and these are an aggregation of at least a dozen polls that have been pretty good in predicting electoral outcomes. If you go there, you're going to see that this has not been a spread that's been favorable to Trump, Nico, generally speaking, and it's looking more and more favorably so. But I'm the kind of guy that says, man, why is this even close? Why are we talking 2 or 3 points? Why aren't we talking 15, 20 points? And so I think that.
But
you know,
why
I
wouldn't
think
it? Why
the
wouldn't it
concern-
reflect, George? And you know about polling more than I do. But why wouldn't it reflect people's sentiments on issues? Trump. And one question that girl
Yes.
Stephanie did ask is, people believe that Trump can handle the border and the economy better by whatever percentage.
Sure.
Why wouldn't? I mean, unless people just don't think those are important issues in their lives. If we think Trump is better in here, and we think this, and this many people more think Trump is better on the economy and the border, but no big deal. I'd rather vote on this issue or my feelings or whatever
Yes.
it is. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I would think there'd be, if those are the two main issues, those should be the two driving factors. I mean, Bill Maher, bitches all the time about the left and progressivism and woke and all that stuff, even though he's still a staunch Democrat, and that's fine. But then he goes and he complains and complains, but he's still going to vote for complaints. But okay, I guess. I mean, is it something like that? Do we have any direction on that? Because why isn't there a reflection on the polls versus what people's sentiment is on different issues?
And I think when you're farther away from an election, they're snapshots in time. They're quirky. They're virtually entirely unreliable. As we get in the home stretch here, I think they're becoming more and more reliable for obvious reasons. They're coming up on election day. Early voting has started in quite a few states. People are grappling with these things, and so it's game time. And so if you're polling a person at that time, that's the best indicator. And now it looks the most favorable for Trump that it ever has. And that's why I keep coming back to this Gallup poll. And there's been a lot of weighing in on this Gallup poll because it looks very, very good on issue after issue. It looks like Republicans are pulling ahead outside the margins of error. That's what I meant, Karen.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter when you're inside. If you're inside the margin of error, you're tied at best. But when you actually start pulling away and you're outside the margins of error on critical issues, and again, the big issues are the economy and immigration, it's looking more and more favorable for Trump and for the Republicans. And it looks like, Nico, I think it looks like it looks quite probable that we will win the House and the Senate at this point, if I had to guess. And they have every reason to be concerned. They're not looking really great. As you probably
Who has reason to be concerned?
Democrats have every reason to be concerned. I mean, they have a paper-thin edge in the Senate right now. They're very worried that John Tester. It really does come down to one guy, Karen. John Tester in Montana. His chances of winning look really, really weak. And the idea that Democrats at this point can somehow flip a Republican seat.
How's Ted Cruz doing? I mean, they said some polls, quote unquote, were.
He's ahead, but it's not. I mean, he can't sit on his laurels. It's insubstantial, I think. So it looks really, really good at this point. What's Trump doing that would help him right now? I mean, what would be your advice for Trump at this point? What should he keep doing to continue creating more and more daylight between he and Harris? I mean, you've run a campaign before. What's the one thing you would tell him right now?
Keep out there talking to people. I don't know what.
It's a combination of things. If one thing it is, I mean, keep doing interviews, keep answering questions, keep challenging her to answer questions, control his tongue, control his thoughts, don't say stupid stuff.
You're asking for too much,
Well,
Nico.
I mean, he's asking for a lot, too, to be the
What
president.
kinds of interviews?
Okay, let's keep that thought, and we're going to take a break, and we will be right back. on WOAI, and please join us for the live portion of it on social media, and the show continues
Well, we're
afterwards.
live right now.
Yes.
But on afterwards, Nico can cuss. I don't know. The after show. That's the difference. That's the difference.
Somebody will bleep me out.
If you want to enjoy some good cuss words from Nico, stay after the after show. Stay at the after show. But Diana Mercado, thank you for logging on. Ernest, Jonas, thank you, man. Richard, Donna, Gandhi logged on. Judy says, stop name calling and go to town halls. connection with the American people is important. That's what the advice she's giving to Trump. Karen, thank you very, very much. Karen Town Hall and remain human. Good advice. Judy, thank you for your comments. Frank says, Frank Lutz came out yesterday with data that voters identify as Republican more than Democrat for the first time since decades. Check out what Vinny says to you, Nico. Nico, I would bet the polls are based on questions relative to predominant Democrat-based issues such as abortion, guns, and gender poop. See how I screened myself right there?
Good for you.
Yeah, anyway, thank you. I did good.
No, it's not. It's not. Just a quick correction. It's not. I don't know that that's a legitimate criticism. I think there has been a legitimate criticism that's been getting a lot more airtime in the last 3 weeks to a month. I think it's always been in the back of people's heads, Karen, but nobody wants to talk about it because it makes them sound conspiratorialist. And that's the notion that these polls are somehow weighted in favor of Democrats, not necessarily because of the questions, but because of the people that they're asking. And so there's more. It's weighted in the favor. There's in favor of Democrats. There's much more Democrats that are being asked questions than Republicans, and it's not representative of the electorate. And so therefore, and that's legitimate. That is legitimate. We've seen instances where that's definitely the case. And so I think from that standpoint, we're wondering if these polls really have the credibility that they should have.
Well, so many things have happened in the last few weeks that make you think, okay, light is finally starting to be shed on hypocrisy, lies, things, wrongdoings. One would be Eric Adams. And another would be Cuellar. And then you were talking about a judge that was recused locally with those 3 police officers.
Yeah, so we're representing one of the police officers charged with crimes against the woman that had a hammer, and they end up shooting. And 2 officers were charged with murder. Our officer was charged with aggravated assault by a peace officer and other things. And so we had a hearing on Thursday, and Judge Boyd was recused from the case. And people didn't understand it, and people thought, oh, it's a show, it's for the cops. No, it's not about it's about the process. It's about Lady Justice having a blindfold. It's about the appearance of impropriety and the impartiality that a jurist plays in the whole system. And we complain about this person wasn't treated fair, the system sucks. Well, okay, it can suck towards officers too. I mean, they're not above the law, but they're not below the law. I've prosecuted many officers and I've defended many officers. So, I'm depending on the role I play, but in this, and I serve in, but in this, the rules of civil procedure applied. And the standard essentially is an impartiality. Does the judge show impartiality because there's a reasonable, can the judge be reasonably questioned or harbors a personal bias against either the subject matter or the person involved or some of the litigants or the person involved in the case? This impartiality and reasonable questionness. I mean, the standard's really kind of that. There's not a lot of case law on it. And what Judge Harrell had to assess was, would a reasonable person, here's like an objective person standard, would a reasonable person, knowing all the facts and circumstances, would that person harbor doubts of the impartiality of the jurist overlooking the case? And so we presented a lot of evidence. It was on KSAT. I think they live streamed it or whatever. It was out there. People can make up their own minds on their own. But it was the right thing to do. I mean, Judge Harrell is an experienced jurist.
And you would think an impossible thing to do. It's a tall hurdle to climb, isn't it? It's a tall hill to climb to establish that.
Well, it's a civil procedure. It's part of the rules of civil procedure. And, you have this idea, because this judge here has a YouTube channel, which to many of us in the criminal side is insane. It's not allowed on the civil. Yeah,
She's an influencer.
Never mind.
Well, you're not supposed to be an influencer. You're supposed to be an overlooker.
Right.
That's the problem. A judge is not supposed to be an influencer. They're overlooking a process. And that's it. And impartial, meaning blindfold. Doesn't care who you are, what you look like, what party you're part of. That's why I can't stand partisan positions. You're a district court and a misdemeanor, county court judge. Who cares if you're a Republican or Democrat?
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, Nico, is the recusal of judges should be,
should be rare.
Very rare.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it was so chaos throughout the legal system.
Well, it is.
To me.
It is rare. It's a big deal. But again,
so that's why it would be a big deal to establish that. But you're saying if somebody's out there on video,
it's not. It wasn't just that. There was a lot more to this. There was definitely impartiality. The judge saw the evidence. And ironically, her YouTube channel came back to bite her because we used a lot of her YouTube channel to present the evidence. Patrick Ballantyne was the lead on it. He did a wonderful job. And there's co-counsel with the other citizens that are accused as well. Other law firms working together. We have a joint defense agreement. So all that was presented to the judge. We have an experienced jurist that was on the bench for 30 years, and he's the regional judge now. And so we made the right decision. We all believe that. And so We want a fair referee. That's it, man.
Yep.
And here's the unique thing about this situation: the state was one of our witnesses. So the state asked for a continuance. The state, the DA's office was.
I want to know more.
Yeah, you can go back and look at it. So that's what's going on, but in that situation, but.
It was
We'll have our day in
surprising
court.
in New York too to see. I mean, I know you always say don't go ha ha ha, but when Eric Adams, when all of a sudden his whole world started crashing around him, I was like, oh, is that what happens when you question the border? And I remember Eric Adams kind of nervously in front of his city council saying, we can't handle this. And then suddenly everything around him started, well, he got indicted. And is that retaliation? Is that just the way things work in New York?
Look, a lot of
What
people.
Karen's saying is she's not the only one who's wondering if there's something else here, something else going on other than
But look,
other than
so
the
people are saying
allegations.
the same thing about Henry Cuellar too. He questioned the border
Yes.
stuff. This guy questioned. Look, so there's ways to look at it. That this is retaliation. Okay, one possibility. Number two, this is impartial. There's that word again.
Yep.
And this is fair.
New York?
And there's something.
In New
And
York?
there's something to attack. And then there's that one. It's like, well, we would have overlooked. This is the third camp. We would have overlooked all this stuff that we know that you and others are doing, but because you don't play ball with us, now we're going to make an issue of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's people are asking questions. What about Biden? What about all that? So you have the special counsels coming in, and the special counsel essentially said the only reason why we're not prosecuting Biden is because he's too old and nobody will convict him. I mean, essentially, right? The takeaway.
You're right.
Okay, well, I don't know where that standard is. I mean, okay, but so
Essentially an elderly man
right.
who's not really in control of his faculties.
But with Eric Adams,
But he can be president. Go ahead, please.
I disagree with the way he's run New York. I've agreed with certain stances and the way he's questioned certain things, but then he isn't too hard. I don't know enough about him. I know he strikes me as kind of a Willie Brown-esque type mayor. He was kind of the cool mayor. He's single, goes out, wears nice clothes, which nothing wrong with that. He presents well. He's kind of this mixture. He goes out with celebrities that come to New York. I mean, being the mayor in New York is kind of a big deal. I mean, New York used to be a happening place and kind of a mecca center. And then he gave this is the part, he gave the city the key to the city to P. Diddy, and that's a problem. That's going to be a stain on his deal. But what's his vision, right? So they're alleging that he likes this lavish lifestyle, upgrades. I mean, I watched the press conference where the U.S. attorney laid out, but remember what an indictment is. An indictment
Correct.
an indictment is nothing more as a document that is created by a prosecutor. A prosecutor wrote this in document, and a grand jury went along with it. That's all it is.
I know, Nico,
people think of a grand jury as this gatekeeper process. It is not a gatekeeper process. I'm sorry. It is not like there's experienced former prosecutors, defense attorneys, and detectives and citizens all together on pushing back and questioning. Hey, wait a minute. There's no cross-examination. There isn't. It's all one-sided presentation, and they can present whatever they want. And there's no standard. It's not like beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the different standard. And then they come back with a true bill of indictment. I mean, this is not a gatekeeper function. This is kind of okay, it's enough, I guess, and we'll go along with it. So someone getting indicted is not
ironic that he was indicted in New York, and he actually said the words like, "I'm being falsely accused," and and I was like, "Oh, that sounds familiar."
Sounds very familiar. You got to sort of what do you say? I don't know if it was you who said it. You certainly said an indictment's not a crime, but then again, a denial's not evidence.
Right.
So, we'll find out. Ultimately, this will shake out. But it is questionable. If you look at the progression of events, you have to wonder. He was a media darling. He comes in, in 2021. Obviously, he's a black Democrat mayor in New York. I mean, this is a big deal. And so the media is all over him. They love him. And then in the immediate sort of eve before the election, and then right after the election, he begins to criticize the Biden administration. And he's not criticizing them ambiguously. He is definitively critical about how they're handling what is now the lack of a border in the South. And he's out there. He's dogged about it. That said, there's some 210,000 illegal aliens now in New York City under his watch. He's not happy about it. He's been forthright about it. And almost immediately after those criticisms, you see charges being announced, or at least rumors of these kinds of charges or allegations, I should say, not charges, but allegations in 2021, because this goes back to 2021.
And before
Yes.
he was mayor.
Well, I want to pick at that a little bit, because a lot of these allegations apparently, supposedly happened before he was mayor.
Right.
But the heat on Adams, legally, seems to have started in the immediate aftermath of his intense criticism. So you're not the only one who's thinking this, Karen. I saw an interview. Yes, I do occasionally watch videos. And it was Representative Claudia Tenney from New York. And she actually spelled out in detail what you're saying, that she thought that this, in fact, was it just stank of ulterior motives. And she laid it out, I think, pretty definitively. Now, is that true? We don't know. But I think it reflects the mood when people look at this administration and the tendency to go after anyone who sort of strays from their political narrative and what they're trying to achieve in the country.
You can't help but think this is more than just this administration. It's the Democratic machine. Look at Biden. Biden's this darling that everybody was defending. He's got his faculties, from Kamala Harris to everybody, to the media. Everybody was protecting him. He did not, that debate performance against Trump didn't happen overnight. This was, everyone who was paying attention that half a brain could know that this was a potential. And so that happened. And then before the night was over, the dumping started. Everybody, the pressure. They even got George Clooney involved. I mean, everybody's dumping on him to get out, and then he pushes back, and who knows what the closed-door meetings were about. And then as soon as he does what the machine tells him to do, now all of a sudden the View can't hug him hard enough, and you're
Put
so
him on Mount
wonderful.
Rushmore.
Everything. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Except at the Democratic convention, they put him on at 11 o'clock at night, but whatever. So I mean, but they want to honor him, and he's serving his country, did such a great job, and all this other stuff. I mean, if you're paying attention with your popcorn, I mean, I think it's obvious that what's going on.
That's right.
Hey, we only have one more segment on WOAI, so now's the time to get on social media and join us for the after show as we continue, but we'll be right back. This is Sidebar, and we hope you stay with us after 10 o'clock when we continue the show on social media platforms. And Sidebar TV is where you can find where to go.
Somebody was mentioning Join the Resistance, the Rescue the Republic event going on in Washington tomorrow. You want to go, Nico? Check it out. Check out the lineup. Check out the lineup for Rescue the Republic. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson, Tulsi Gabbard, and Skillet is going to be participating.
Where's that going to be?
In Washington, D.C.
I wonder if they're going to call the National Guard.
I am.
I hope.
That's a good lineup.
Amazing lineup.
Yeah.
That's a good lineup.
So you talk the truth in America, you might get indicted. What happens when you say the truth in front of the United Nations? You're the president of Argentina. Does anything happen? Is anybody listening? Can y'all talk about that a little bit?
I must say, Giorgia Meloni from Italy must have been breathing a sigh of relief that now the heat's off of her. Because she's been doing a lot of what Milei's been doing, or trying to do it in Italy. I think she's been a star. You've seen these rise of what they call populist leaders.
Yeah.
I mean, decidedly conservative leaders. These are leaders who want their strong nations. They have a strong sense of national identity, the people of a nation, national values, and fighting for the integrity of the nation. go figure, what a concept to actually have a leader who cares about national integrity and the well-being of people. So you've seen Giorgia Meloni in the last few years, and she's done very, very well in Italy. She's taken an unbelievable amount of hell from the UN and from the manipulators in the EU. And that's really the issue that's the topic that Javier Milei brought to the UN. He brought a giant mirror. And he stood up there.
That is so
And he talked to them in those terms. And it was a hell of a barn burner, Nico. I think.
I mean, he went down. He went through history. He talked about what the UN was initially set up for and why. And he talks about, 2 world wars within 40 years, and now we've had 70 years, and for what? And here's the ideas. And he really brought an American constitutional set of ideas, which is, he's a libertarian, right? Classical liberal, whatever you want to call him. But he's a libertarian. And you can't deny what he's done for his country. I mean, inflation was down. I don't know if these numbers are accurate, George. You can correct me. 25 to 3%. They had runaway inflation. The price housing are down. They had rent control programs. Oh, Kamala Harris, hello. We have some idea. We have data. We have experiments. He scrapped all the rent control programs that have been scrapped back to a free market. He brought this wonderful kind of capsulation of a classical libertarian mindset of limited government to support ordered liberty, not just liberty. Your liberty ends where my nose begins type of mindset, but ordered liberty. And he went. I thought he was poised. I was listening to a translator, but poised, but direct. It wasn't offensive. He invited people to come on. It's not too late. He wanted to be encouraging. I love that he quoted not only Thomas Paine, from one of the founders of this country, but also Isaiah. He mentioned the Bible.
Leviathan.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
He mentioned the Bible and these biblical principles, universal principles, these inalienable, he didn't say it, but these inalienable rights that government nor the UN, and then called out the UN for hypocrisy. I thought it was great.
And a completely unacceptable coalescence of power that represents the interests of the few and blows off the interests of their own people. He really did, Nico. I think you stole my thunder because, we both love history, but he did go through history and talked about this kind of transformation of the UN into this basically a dystopian socialist nightmare. And he pulled out England as an example. I pulled out this piece of what he said, which I think represents the whole. Quote, "We are undertaking a change of paradigm, not only economic, but also social, political, and cultural. And with this change, we are going against the direction that in recent times many countries in the world are undertaking. While other countries propose censorship, we propose freedom of expression." He's talking about a shift, obviously, in Argentina. But what he claims is a shift that goes beyond Argentina. And it was almost like he wasn't just representing Argentina, but he was representing this clarion call for individual liberties and freedom across the world. He says, look at just what is happening in England. He said, since the socialists came to power, he's talking about under Keir Starmer, they are putting people in jail for posting on social networks. Mm-hmm. Well, the journalists here would also like it because, let's say, they don't like that they have lost the mic, the monopoly of the microphone, and to be able to use that tool to distort and dirty slander at no cost. The social networks send them invoices and they don't like it. Stop looking for ghosts. They are receiving the same thing they did, but nothing more than people do it organically because they realize that many of them are criminals. In turn, while others are getting closer and closer to falling into cultural and religious wars, which will eventually expel people from their countries of origin, we invite the rest of the free world to participate in a country under reconstruction. It's not just about Argentina. This is a global cause for freedom. And I'm telling you that Antonio Guterres, the general secretary, must have been dropping a load as he sat there and listened to this. Talk about a rebuke, an appropriate rebuke.
It was very appropriate.
Very rebuke. A very significant rebuke, and may we hear more
history
of it.
and their mission statement against them. That's a very effective argument when you're trying to criticize. When you use someone's own words against them, strong trial technique. Use their own position, use their own mission, use their own purpose against them. I mean, it's a compare and contrast argument, and so he says, look, let's compare and contrast what we do today in this UN facade versus what we were supposed to do and what this organization was set up for and its intent, and what are you doing now? So you're you're a hypocrite. So it was really good. I mean, and I didn't get through Netanyahu's full speech, but he was bringing fire too, rightfully so. I mean, he was, he wasn't going to come, then he came, and then he just went down. He talked about blessings and curses, and he just, again, I'm not finished with the whole thing, but I didn't listen to it.
But I like what you said about him using the mission of the UN against them.
Yeah.
In other words, the deviation from that mission. And he said, in this very house that claims to defend human rights, they have allowed the entry of bloody dictatorships like those of Cuba. He calls out countries like those of Cuba and Venezuela without the slightest reproach. In this very house that claims to defend the rights of women, it allows countries that punish their women for showing skin to enter the Committee for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So hypocrisy after hypocrisy after hypocrisy, the UN has lost its way. And so I think, what's this mean for Trump? Because Trump is aligned. This is the point. They're calling him sort of the Argentinian Trump. Because on the issues of individual freedoms, on the issues of governments doing the bidding of their people, and representatives, go figure, actually representing the interests of their people in policy, Trump and Milei are aligned. Meloni in Italy is aligned. We're starting to see an alignment, thank goodness, globally, on this issue of coming back to the power of the citizen.
I didn't listen to El Salvador's Bukele's, but I mean, I'm sure it's good.
That guy's a firebrand too. It's the same thing.
I mean, you got reelected by 85+%.
That's what I was going to say.
And people are pleased. That guy's going to stay there as long as he wants to.
There's a momentum building, and may it continue.
But you think, oh gosh, it's another country, and he won by 85%, and nobody stole it away from him. And it just makes you come back to think about America and how, I know it wasn't proven officially, but there were so many cheats that have come to light. You just think, how can these other countries?
Here's what I tell people, and I get the arguments, and I'm always cautious because I'm just so driven by due process and evidence and objectivity. But people have reason to be concerned. But everybody should. I mean, Democrats have in the past. Okay, check. Republicans have check. Why don't we work on the electoral system? Let's just work on that to have free and fair elections, period, end of story. What does that look like? Okay, now let's get into the definitions. How about being a citizen? Everybody agree? You don't agree? Why? That's a stupid reason. No one's going to listen to you. So boom, okay, a citizen. Number 2, make sure it's you, the citizen, that's voting. That's kind of cool. Make sure dead people aren't voting. All right, great.
Go figure.
I mean, give people opportunities because this country is different than Mexico. Okay, check off. I'm fair. We didn't need to change anything. You have early voting for 2 weeks before. You can vote at any polling site. You have absentee voting for those that specifically qualify if you're serving overseas or if you're an age and you have some type of medical condition. I mean, there needs to be strict making sure that you adhere to certain qualifications to be an absentee voter. What else do we need? I mean, the idea that no one has the freedom to vote because you don't have an ID, that is such a red herring. It's
totally.
It's so intellectually dishonest, and it's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for people that make that argument because outside the soundbite, if you sit down and they don't want to do this and dissect, what do you mean by we don't have a freedom to vote? What do you mean? I mean, explain what you mean by that. And I've never heard one good explanation because it's not crazy to expect to make sure that you're a citizen and you have a good ID to vote.
But doesn't it make you just, to me, it makes me continually ask, how can hate be that deep for one man?
It's not just for him though. He's just carrying the flag for traditional conservative values that more people believe in. Again, it's so emotionally driven.
It's been effective.
It's so exactly. It's so emotionally driven that people, when you sit down, I've had talks with people that I have passionately disagreed with, and then I just dissect one issue after the other. And we're not as far off as we thought when we first got into that conversation. We're just not. We're far off on other things. We had a good conversation. We talk it out, hash it out, debate it, argue it, whatever you want to do. But we just don't, we're missing this foundation in this country anymore.
But is it worth voting for a woman and having no food and no gas in your car just because, you want a woman? Because I still don't understand that vote either. I'm just voting because I want the first woman president. It's like, what?
But it's the emotional argument that Nico was making that's been so effective that the Democrats have made. It's a horrible argument, but think about it at its base. The greatest sin in America, right? I think most people say is racism, historical racism. And so what do you hate more than your love for Trump? racism, and they've revolved a lot of their politics around that, and they've been able to push an unbelievable amount of policy because of that label. And that's what this voter ID thing always, it comes right back down to racism. It's the idea, it's totally fallacious, it's false, but the idea that you are disenfranchising black voters, for instance, or people of color, because somehow they don't have access to ID like the average white person does.
It's offensive.
If you
It's
are
offensive.
and so
It is
why
so
would,
offensive.
And so think about it. It's unjust in their view to demand that somebody brings voter ID when in fact there's all these horrible draconian policies that prevent them by virtue of systemic racism from getting access to voter ID. And that's fallacious. It's false. But they've been very effective at that message.
Sure.
And I don't think Republicans have been effective on the counter message. I wish there was a way to communicate that this is BS and what the truth actually is.
Well,
But it's been effective.
There's just too many topics every week. It's like we don't have enough time. That's why we started the after show. So hopefully if you're not driving, don't watch while you're driving and once you get hurt. But I mean, jump on to one of our social media, I don't know, Facebook, X, Instagram,
YouTube,
Twitter,
X,
whatever.
yep.
Not Instagram, right? YouTube,
Not yet.
whatever it is. And we'll talk more about Milei, the UN, progressivism, the institutions and universities, talking about the Constitution is a threat. We were going to talk about that last week. But please join us. Share this with someone you think may enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in. Have a very blessed weekend. With guests from Leah, she's gonna read outside. She'll be reading a book, so she'll be.
Look at that.
Say hello?
Yes.
Hi.
Is it Maya's birthday today?
Yes.
Did you say it was happy birthday to Maya?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, go read your book, Angel. She has a volleyball game.
Wait, Davi needs to
Davi's
get
here.
in.
Davi's
Come
here.
on.
The real queen, La Reina.
Gonna say hi. Good morning, everybody. Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Oh, there you go. Hi, guys.
Incredible.
Teacher class. All right.
Yeah. So we're running
Go to
around.
it.
Have fun.
Have fun.
Love you.
Right out here, baby. Love you too. Right there, Angel. God bless you. Okay,
Nice.
back to business.
No, I don't want to do anything that's
You can't go
depressing.
back like
Right
that.
after that, so sweet. She can't be in there. This is not a PG radio show
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
So she's got to go outside. Okay.
Is it okay?
whatever you want.
Okay.
Whichever which- okay, back to PG. Yeah, she's going to stay in here. Back to PG radio show. Quick. No more. Thank you,
It
Salo.
is funny. You know, you brought up that New York. I don't know where we're going to start, but that New York Times article that was saying that the Constitution is dangerous. It almost saddens me that the author, the journalist that wrote that, said those things, and I still didn't understand what she was getting at, because isn't the Constitution the only thing that's kept us free and where we are and American? How did that?
But this is
even-
nothing new, George. And George is going to bring us a historical dump here in a second. But progressivism has always thought that the Constitution was a threat. I mean, Woodrow Wilson, right? Didn't he said the enemy of the people? The Constitution is the enemy of the people. That it's a dead document. I mean, this is nothing new. We hear about it now, but we need to know where progressivism and this mindset, this idea that freedom and liberty and the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, the founder's definition of happiness, not feeling-based happiness, is something that's a threat. Think about that. That's a threat. You know, the goal of progressivism, and it's a quote, you know, the goal is there's the perfection of man and his society through the instrumentality of the state. So the idea of progressivism is that society and man becomes perfected not through God, not through a transcendent creator of all things that endowed these rights on us. Think about this statement, but through the instrumentality of the state. So these rights, these inalienable rights endowed on us by freedom and by a creator, is now these inalienable rights, they're alienable. They're alienable rights endowed to us by the government. It's antithetical to a traditional
exact reversal.
a complete. And this is nothing new. They hate the Constitution because it restricts government. End of story.
That's it.
And power.
That's it. It limits power.
Yeah.
The ones that want
Bottom line.
more power.
Separation of powers, first three articles. I mean, it's everything you need to know there, but that's the focus of the Constitution. There's a philosophical notion that centralizing too much power in the hands of one person is not a good idea. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking as you were talking about Alexander Hamilton, he had Hamilton and Madison had lots to say on the Constitution, and they were intense proponents of it, and fighters for the cause of the ratification of the Constitution. The way the Constitution came to be was not for the faint-hearted. I mean, there was a lot of intensity around it. Karen, you may remember from your high school history.
No, I don't
that-
remember anything, but
that
go
the
ahead.
Constitution basically deposed a lesser perfect document called the Articles of do you remember that the Articles of Confederation, which came into being in 1777, and they went into effect in 1781. They were this kind of sort of temporary governing document, and had all kinds of problems. And so, the founders and the framers, they were just chomping at the bit to revise it, to make it better, to improve it. And so there was this gathering in 1786 called the Annapolis Convention. And that's really the seeds of a body, of an assembly to not only address the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, but to also talk about a way forward. And then you had this, shortly thereafter, you had something called the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And it was an intense process. Nico has brought this up before, that the debates were going so badly. That Ben Franklin literally had to say,
Stop.
hey, fellas, I think
pray.
we need to begin daily prayers here
George,
Did
to
Nancy
sort of
Pelosi
move
tear anything in half
the
back
process
It's
along.
worse than that, Karen.
I
But George, I'm
know.
so glad you brought that up. We bring this up every time when we talk about this. Benjamin Franklin, this whatever people called it, he wasn't a biblically minded person. He respected Jesus Christ and his teachings tremendously. He said, we got to stop, guys. I mean, these 13 colonies, if we don't come together, we're never going to get away from King George. And there was this monarch that they hated that mindset. Look, there's different ways to rule. You can have a monarchy, which is a ruling of one person. You can have an oligarchy, the ruling of a few people for their own benefit. And then you have, we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, but the rule of many, right? And so that's it. And they wanted to get away from the rule of one, and they didn't want to go to a rule of a few. And so they're having to corral everyone in, right, George? I mean, and so he said, we got to pray, guys. 3 days, they said, we got to pray and fast. Adams talks about it, Adams' right to Abigail. his wife. You should see their letters.
I love
what they
that.
did.
I get goosebumps.
It's exactly right, and we have lots of correspondence from again Adams,
John Adams, right?
Sure,
Abigail Adams.
Jefferson, Hamilton, Madison, and I'll share some of their thoughts here very briefly. But
Please.
But I thought it was the sausage making fascinates me. It was not a bunch of elitists talking in multisyllabic terms. Yeah, they were much more eloquent than the average American is today, inarguably. but it was intense and it was ugly, and people were getting stuck in ruts. But the debates were useful, Nico, because out of those debates came something called the Bill of Rights.
Right.
I mean, this is the point. Does the Constitution? This is sort of the essence. I mean, there are other issues, but the essence of the debate is: does the Constitution go far enough in securing the rights of man? Does it really go far enough? Does it really protect us? I mean, guys, hello, have we not just been through a massive revolution, loss of life? We do not want to do that again. And so let's make sure we get this right. They're about 4 years removed from the end of the American Revolution, which culminated in the Paris Treaty in 1783. So here they are at 1787. They're arguing intensely about it. Ben Franklin says, this is getting way out of control. Yep. We really need to get back to daily prayers about this to move the process along. They did come together ultimately to do so. The thing did move forward, obviously, and it was signed on September 17th of 1787. So 10 days ago yesterday. And 10 days ago yesterday in 1787, we signed the Constitution. It wasn't the end of it. It had to go to the states to be ratified. That's the point. And that was intense as well. I mean, the states
don't realize what we were fighting over. They were fighting over
know.
slavery. They were fighting over bringing things together. They had these 13 colonies doing their. Read those individual constitutions of those early states. Very grounded in something greater than themselves. Biblically grounded, whether current people like it or not, right? Progressives like it or not. That's why progressives hate the Constitution. It's grounded in something greater than government.
Without
outside a creator that outside of time, space, and matter that created everything and gave us these rights that man and government and institutions did not give to us. Man, government, and institutions, their job is to protect these rights. That's a complete
yes.
And Milei talks about that. And he brings that up, and that's why I bring up Thomas Paine, that if you're going to have these rights, you better go through painstaking process to defend these rights, or you're going to lose them. So he talks about Thomas Paine, talks about Isaiah, and then the prophet Isaiah, and talking about that swords are going to be put down, and we're not going to need them anymore. That's the idea behind the UN, not division and factions, but unity under freedom and liberty. It was a liberty-driven. We're never going to go back to what happened and why it was created. They're not going to forget their purpose, and they forgot their purpose.
Truly.
And so it's disgusting, actually.
And they kind of came back and said, man, this would never have happened without divine intervention. That's how badly it was going.
In the Constitution.
Yeah, and
yes.
a lot of delegates said that, and delegates that you would typically not associate with overt Orthodox theology. So I just pulled a couple of clips that I thought were pertinent to that. Alexander Hamilton said, "For my own part, I sincerely esteem it a system which, without the finger of God, never could have been suggested and agreed upon by such a diversity of interests." If you ever want to know how to properly use the word diversity, that's a good use of it right there. James Madison came right behind him and said, I agree. He says, "It is impossible for the man of pious reflection not to perceive in it the finger of the almighty hand, which has been so frequently and signally extended to our relief in the critical stages of the revolution." He's talking about the forging of the Constitution. And then in the you saw it from Washington and from Franklin as well. But it is important to note here that a lot of the delegates, these were people who were trained in theology. Many of them were Orthodox Christians. Many of them were not, but many of them were. But there was a clear sentiment that left to their own devices, left to their own interests, this never would have happened.
George and I go through this on R-Rated every once in a while, where government and faith come into our discussion. People ask questions. And just going, if you spent time, and other organizations have done this, but if you go through times looking at their initial letters and quotes from our founding fathers, from Andrew Jackson all the way down to James Madison, to Benjamin Rush, to George Washington. I mean, Andrew Jackson said, "The Bible is the rock on which our republic rests." I mean, hello. I mean, you don't have to like that. I got it. And if you want to change it, make your point and give me the reasons why. Don't just complain about something. Complain and then give me a solution. And George and I will go through just quote after quote after quote. That I get it. I understand it's uncomfortable. Got it. Check. But sorry, it is what it is, and you don't have to like it.
Just have to get over it.
What the hell happened? What the hell happened?
We let our guard down. You know, Scripture talks about in Ephesians 4:27 to not even give a foothold to the enemy. A foothold. And that's what happened, in my opinion, a foothold.
We gave them a farm.
And well, but it just starts with a foothold.
Yeah.
When you think about a drip, and George builds homes, you think about, it's just a drip. But then drip, drip, drip over
Grand
time.
Canyon.
over time, then you have mold in a house. It's
Yeah.
all destroyed, and many times not on the surface. Many times you'll look at a house, there's nothing wrong with that house, and then people are getting sick, and then you test, it's like, what's going on? And you start tearing down walls and getting underneath the sheetrock and into the studs and saying, this house is ruined, and we've got to gut it out and it all started with a drip. That's, in my opinion, that foothold years ago, and we can, and scholars and George and other people can look exactly when that was, and it wasn't yesterday. This mindset. And then we reached this idea, and we've talked about Engel versus Vitale in 1963, where the Supreme Court said finally, no more biblical principles in public schools. That's when it started to me, many times before that. But I mean, that's when it started in society and getting to our kids. The 10 Commandments were taken out of schools. There was no open prayer in public schools. It wasn't forced on people back then, but it was allowed and it was encouraged, not forced. There's a difference. And you can reject it, that's fine, but they were exposed to it. And you can look at data from SATs to divorce rates to crime and to this to that, and you can data. And is it a causation? Arguably, you can say not, but definitely a correlation. And you look at all these things, and then we reach a point at some point in society, Karen, where Isaiah 5:20 comes to pass. Isaiah 5:20 says, "Woe to you," the prophet is telling us, "who call evil good and good evil, who substitute night for day and day for night, bitter for sweet, sweet for bitter." When your definitions are backwards, and Netanyahu talks about that in his speech, a part of it that I saw, he says, you know, we're forced to defend ourselves from evil terrorists, and we're called the people that are committing genocide. It's this flipping of definitions.
I know.
It's not about the vocabulary, because you can sound good for a while, but when you get into your definitions, that's when you expose somebody.
No,
or
I
something.
mean, that's an excellent point. This should have been very, very glaring to people watching, that you've got Biden Harris pushing for victory in Ukraine, but for surrender in Israel. But that's okay. You know, I mean, the contrast is stunning. And if you look at Israel's objectives here and the moral legitimacy of their fight, the idea that you would even suggest some sort of bogus ceasefire, I mean, God bless them, and may they continue doing what they're doing. I love it. They're no longer beholden to the interests of the United States. I think it's great. I love seeing this new autonomy. I think they're doing the right thing. We'll set that for another day. But good for Israel for doing what's right for its people.
Man.
Good for them. But getting back to this, and I thought I'd pick kind of a transitional statement to this New York Times article that argued that the Constitution is a threat. One of my favorite presidents is Calvin Coolidge. And he had this to say about it. He said, the more I study the Constitution, the more I've come to admire it, realizing that no other document devised by the hand of man ever brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that has ever occurred to the human race. And I have to agree with him. That's exactly how I feel about it, having come from another country where there was just significant unrest, political unrest that culminated in the Civil War that my family survived. I can barely talk about the Constitution and not be driven to tears. I don't mean to be melodramatic, but I recognize that vested in the Constitution is the hope for people, really.
Yeah.
Because it focuses on the preciousness of human beings as God sees them. And that's why they're worthy of these rights. Not because of anything we've done, but by the wonderful, matchless grace of God, really. And the Constitution, in essence, is primarily a legal document, but it acknowledges a theological reality, doesn't it, Nico? As does the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. They're self-evident. Why are they self-evident truths? That we've been what? Created by an actual creator. This is a theological statement that opens the Declaration of Independence. And the Constitution puts a legal framework kind of around those values. And so this article actually denies all of that. And again, this just gets back, it all comes back to Trump. And the argument that she makes, which is, I think is astonishing, is that the Constitution is a threat because basically it made Trump possible. That's the basic essence
That's
of the
so
argument.
sad.
The Constitution
Of
is
whose
sacred.
argument?
Is it also
That New York
dangerous?
Times article.
got it.
This is Jennifer Zelaya from the New York Times.
Got it,
She's
got
a
it.
New York Times book critic, and it's called her piece is called "The Constitution is Sacred. Is it also dangerous?" And she makes the basic argument. It's a pretty lengthy article that accuses Trump of being a threat to the Constitution, but then argues that the Constitution is partially to blame because it allowed Trump to exist. And so builds an argument essentially through that prism. So what could go wrong, Nico?
Look, I mean, for me, I'll just my questioning of this Trump hate, because I didn't follow Trump. I didn't watch the Apprentice.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I knew he was married to a chick named Marla Maples or
Yeah.
what Maples. I didn't know anything about him. There was Trump Tower. I knew he had bad hair, and he was a billionaire. That's all I knew about the dude. I'm not being funny. But then I started studying it because I didn't like him. I wasn't a Trump supporter at the beginning. And then I said, but everyone loved this dude. He's on Donahue. He's on Oprah. She's hugging him. Barbara Walters loves him.
All of
Whoopi loved
Hollywood.
him. All of Hollywood loved him. All of the music industry loved him. 50 Cent. He's in rapping. He's at WrestleMania. He's a part of this. He's doing this. I mean, he saves the skating ring in New York, and everybody loves him, and they cheer him on. He does this. He does that. He does all these humanitarian things. And he's got this Apprentice show that everybody loved for all these years or whatever it is. I've never seen one episode. Something didn't make sense to me.
That is so weird.
I saw The Apprentice. My wife loved it. I didn't like Trump that much. It was because of my wife that actually got into Trump, and it was through
That show.
through The
I have
Apprentice.
never seen that show.
I haven't either. But we'll have to go back and watch one maybe.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is what? And then I thought to myself, okay, you don't hear Hillary and Bill's kid say anything. She's not public, which that's her right, and she's probably smart. But I mean, and I'm
Chelsea.
thinking these Chelsea, yeah, these kids, they're either good actresses and actors, and they need to go to Hollywood themselves, or they really have an affinity for their daddy.
Yeah.
You can't be rotten unless your kids are rotten. And I didn't see that the fact that they were rotten. You might disagree with them on
And
things.
the grandkids are like
but
running toward him too.
I mean, this was my process. And then I started,
yes.
when was it? I mean, they love this dude. And he even talks about running for president, and they're encouraging him to.
Yeah.
So what was it? What was it? And then I think about who he supported in the past. He Jesse Jackson can't be a racist. I mean, he wants a black president. How can he call him a racist? I guess unless he's that Lex Luthor that I really hate blacks, but I want a black president so I can somehow work against black people as the black president runs the country.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're a lot smarter than I am. I mean, and then misogyny questions and all this other stuff. Now, was he a
I
playboy?
know.
Was he this? I'm going to keep it PG because my daughter's in here. But I mean, all the other things. I was trying to pinpoint when they started hating Joy Behar. She loved
I
him.
know.
Whoopi. These people adored this guy. They couldn't hug him enough. And then all of a sudden,
What an excellent
16.
It's an excellent rundown because there's something
I don't know.
there's something religious at play here that trumps, no pun intended, their former affinity for Trump. There's something religious here. And it really is a reversal of the values of the Constitution. Over time, we've grown again increasingly distant from our history. This idea of individual autonomy, the exceptionalism of the human being. The fact that God's at the top of the pyramid, not the government, not the government's interests, not some bastardized bullshit view of equality, which isn't equality at all, but basically forcing every human being to be the same. This is a reversal of the American experiment. That's a product of the American educational system. We now have more than one generation who imbibes that nonsense. And so Trump is a threat to that. Trump is a throwback to the way things were.
Mm-hmm.
Trump is a throwback to the religion, the religious view, the convictions upon which the Constitution were founded. I'm not saying Trump is an Orthodox Christian. I don't believe he is.
I don't believe he is. Either.
I don't. That's a separate discussion.
Yep.
But ethically, there's no question that Trump, as an ethicist, believes or upholds the values, in many ways, biblical values. The idea of individual autonomy. The idea that I have the right to determine what kind of future I'm going to have by virtue of having the right to make the choices that I wish to make, and choices have consequences. This is an affront to the new religion of the left, which is that the government is God, and we need to all align with government interests. and any deviation from that is deemed completely unacceptable. So yeah, I agree with you. There's a history in which all these people,
He's
supported
pretty
Trump.
consistent.
They
Whether you
took his
like him or
money.
not. They took his money. They
Yep.
took his support. They took his fame. They took everything. But once he didn't go along to get along with the, with the cabal, with this whole whatever you want to call it, swamp mindset that is it's an interesting dynamic because I never paid attention to it years ago between Hollywood, sports, now corporation, and government.
It's religious.
It's a cultish mindset.
It truly is.
Because it just doesn't make sense to me. He didn't become a racist in his 70s or whatever it was.
No.
He didn't
Yeah.
become this and this. He didn't do. And then when you listen
Yes.
to he was always complaining about China. He was always talking about American exceptionalism. He was always talking about what's best for the people. He's always been generous to people. Whether you like him or not, you can make the argument he's doing it for the fame. Check. I got it. I'm just saying, I really started looking at things like this analysis as I do any case, whether I was prosecuting it or defending it. And I was looking for consistencies or inconsistencies. And even though I think he's gotten more reckless with his words over the years or whatever and his kind of antics, but the core message has been the same, except he's changed
It
on
really has.
abortion.
It really
and
has
other
been
things.
consistent.
And
Yeah.
he's got a right to make some nuanced changes and then give it reasons for it. I mean, everybody does. Bill Clinton does. Obama does. Harris, Biden, we all have it. But my point is always back it up. Give me the reason why you made such a drastic change if it was drastic. And then,
And there was a time 30, 40 years ago where politically they agreed with him when he talked about China, when he talked about too much power in the hands of the government.
Everybody agreed.
Yeah, remember that and RFK Jr. has made this point. I remember a time, he says, when the Democrat Party, they actually cared about the little guy. They actually cared about the American worker. Remember that?
Yep.
And so
Barely.
listen to this statement. Quote, Trump owes his political assent to the Constitution, making him a beneficiary of a document that is essentially anti-democratic. Listen to that. He owes his political assent to the Constitution. Therefore, he's a beneficiary of a document that is essentially anti-democratic and in this day and age, increasingly dysfunctional. Remember, Trump's evil in this view. Trump is a threat to democracy. Stephanie Ruhle made that same statement on the Bill Maher show. Nobody said anything. Bill Maher sat there. I mean, she looked at Brett Stevens. Well, he's a threat to democracy. And they just kind of sat there like.
See, I would have pushed back on that note.
I
I would have
know.
loved to have been there. So what do you mean by that?
Exactly.
What do you
Exactly
mean by
right.
that? He's guilty of this. What do you mean by that? There's something called evidence. Tell me what do you mean by democracy and how is he a threat to it? Because it comes down to definitions. Kamala Harris, when she talks about freedom not to be shot in school, freedom to do what you want with your body. She's redefined freedom versus what the founders and the framers of the Constitution meant by freedom. So it comes down to, what do you mean? You don't want to get shot in school. Work on the moral compass of people, why people want to shoot people in school, because in Europe they want to stab them, and somewhere else they want to run them over. Cain used a rock. It's not about the rock. It's about the heart behind the rock. But that's number one. And number two, put armed guards in front. You have an armed guard. Put an armed guard. You have armed guards in schools. You're not having anything. You're not having shootings like they've had. It's a fairly simple.
Let's
solution.
drill down. Nico asked a question. I would have pushed back and said, what do they mean by it? Listen to this. She continues. After all, Trump became president in 2016 after losing the popular vote, but winning the Electoral College, which she points out is in Article 2 of the Constitution. He appointed, here we go, 3 justices. Because it's all about this. He appointed 3 justices to SCOTUS, Article 3, 2 of whom were confirmed by senators representing just 44% of the population, Article 1. Those 3 justices, wait for it, helped overturn Roe v. Wade, a reversal with which most Americans disagreed. And then she quotes, and it's true, because I don't know that there's anything good that comes out of California, Berkeley, but the eminent legal scholar Erwin Chemerinsky, and I've read his stuff, worried about opinion polls showing a dramatic loss of faith in democracy after Roe v. Wade. And he wrote a new book called No Democracy Lasts Forever, where he basically goes after the Constitution. And because she goes on to state that it's ultimately, in her view, this idea that I can't do whatever I want to do. I mean, this is implied in what she's saying. People can't just do whatever the hell they want to do. I can't kill my own kid. I can't do that. I should be able to do that with impunity. I should be able to do that, no problem. All the way through the day of birth, I should be able to do that.
Oh, you mean abortion? Yeah.
I mean, this is what she's saying. Yeah. She's vested a lot in this Roe v. Wade overturning. So she could have picked anything, and she picked that. I'm telling you, this is a cult of death. It is a cult of death. These people do not care at all. It is a mindset. They don't care at all about the values that forged the founding documents of the country, which actually put life as front and center.
Yeah.
This is a cult of death. It's moving in the exact opposite direction. And I think, to your point, Nico, this didn't happen overnight. And this is what happens when you put God out of a job. Wherever God's present, there's more life. Jesus said so. I came that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. No, not that so you can have more toys. Read it in context so that you can actually discover what it is that you're here for. And then, to the extent that you're connected to the living God, actually have a better chance of experiencing the fullness that he has in mind for you because you're in relationship with him. So it's all about life, and it stems from the Creator. These are the value systems in the Constitution. It's not overtly theological, but it is definitely theological.
It's pretty close. I mean, it's pretty close. I mean, the ideas, the concepts.
Meaning,
but
people always say, "Well, how come I don't see any biblical verses in there?" That's what I meant by that.
Yeah,
it's not a it's not a biblically doctrinal statement.
The verses were only put in 500 years ago anyway. So I mean, I get it, but I mean, I'm just saying that the ideas are in there.
But they were around in the 18th century.
I know, but the ideas are in there is all we're saying. And that's the bottom.
It is. The Declaration of Independence starts with a theological document and then builds a political argument based on theological assumptions. And then the Constitution keeps going and takes it to the legal front. And this is an exact reversal. Let's kill the Constitution because our value system is no longer about life. It's about my decision to determine who gets to die and when. And if people can't see an exact reversal here at that fundamental level, then
the ideas have the consequences we talk about. I mean, Sharia law has ideas. The Constitution has ideas. Other countries have ideas. In Great Britain and UK, they don't have free speech. People are getting prosecuted for posting memes. I mean, these are ideas. You like that idea? Because guess what? If you like this cancel culture and prosecution and words, silence is violence and words. I mean, okay, great. Well, then what about when the power shifts? Are you okay with it? Be careful the world you help create, because someday you may have to live in it. And the idea is that there's this value in you of the Constitution, which is a biblical idea, that if you want to go deeper, that you have the imago Dei in you. You have the image of God. You're an image bearer. Whether you see it or not, you're an image bearer. It's up to you to figure out what that purpose is in life, what it is, and you're going to apply these ideas of loving your neighbor as yourself. It's better to serve than to be served. It's better to give than to receive. Honor your father and mother. Don't murder people. Yep. Don't steal stuff. Don't bear false witnesses. These are kind of good ideas. I guarantee if you apply these ideas to a society, they flourish. And we have the data. It's not like I'm making this up. We have the data. But so that was important. I think it's important to have more of these discussions. We need to go deeper. I'm being summoned because I have a volleyball game to take our daughter to.
Don't miss the volleyball game.
Come here, baby. And you have a demerit, Theo George, for saying BS. She looked up at me. She goes,
"Put $1 in a jar."
Right? Did you catch Theo George? Isn't that terrible? I don't do that.
Put $1 in a jar for her.
Did you see the look? Demerit for Theo George.
I love it.
Okay. Say goodbye to everybody.
Bye.
You want to say happy birthday to Maya, even though she's not watching?
Happy birthday, Maya.
My goodness, look at that. She's a fighter.
Nice.
She's a good fighter. All right, guys. Anything else?
No.
I'm sorry. It's my fault today. I got a hard stop.
No,
because I
that's
promised
fine.
her
Let's do it.
to take
My
her.
daughters are in town,
Okay,
so
good.
I'm
Enjoy
ready
that.
to go.
Well, guys, thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoy these conversations, make you think, make you critically think, share your ideas, share your thoughts, share this episode with people you think may benefit from it. And we hope that you will join us in next weekend. God bless you. Bye-bye.